Hi, I'm Sherry Lyon, pastor of El Pueblito United Methodist Church in Taos, New Mexico. Like many of you, while we're at home, I've been reading the newspaper online. And recently, I also looked at the comics, and I saw one that I just thought hit home. It was the comic Zits. That's a comic with a mom and a dad and a teenage son. And in this particular cartoon strip, the mom had plugged in her earphones, was dancing around to music on her phone, and her son calls 911 because he thinks she's having a seizure. Well, some of you are probably like me, and for no reason at all, or because we're stuck inside, tell Pandora or Spotify or Alexa, whatever our source of music is, to play our favorite song. And in my case, it's Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison. And we just start dancing around. Now, to be honest, I probably look like that mom in the cartoon, but I'm still dancing, at least in my heart and in my mind. The frightened disciples of Jesus were hiding behind locked doors that first resurrection evening. But they must have danced with joy when Jesus appeared before them. As we hear the story in the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 19 to 29, it's Easter evening, the day that the disciples had learned that Jesus was not in the tomb where they had laid him. Earlier that day, Mary Magdalene had gone to the tomb and discovered that Jesus was not there. Peter and the disciple that Jesus loved, whom we believe is John, had also seen that Jesus wasn't in the tomb. But now it's beginning to get dark, or maybe it's already dark. And the disciples are fearful. Isn't that true for us too? That we tend to get more fearful as night falls? But then Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After Jesus had said this, he showed him his hands and his side, and the disciples rejoiced. And Jesus said again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." When Jesus had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." I like what the Message Bible says about retaining these sins. Eugene Peterson in the Message Bible says, "Why would you retain them? What would you do with them?" All of the disciples were gathered in that upper room behind the locked door, except Thomas. For whatever reason, he wasn't there. And when the others tell Thomas about seeing Jesus, he essentially says, "I don't believe it. I won't until I see for myself." A week later, Jesus returns to where the disciples are gathered. And Jesus gives Thomas, who's now present, permission to touch him. Jesus says, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side." The Bible doesn't tell us whether or not Thomas did that, whether he reached out to touch Jesus. Actually, I think it might reveal more about who we are if we think Thomas needed to do that. But we do know that Thomas looked at Jesus and proclaimed, "My Lord and my God." Poor Thomas. This one experience has labeled him for all time. It doesn't seem to matter that he may have not been any more skeptical than any of the other disciples. It doesn't seem to carry any weight that he's actually credited, Thomas is, with taking the gospel to India, where a group of Christians there are still known as the Order of St. Thomas. It doesn't seem to matter that he died a martyr's death. No, he's known as Doubting Thomas. But as for me, I'm glad we hear each year the story of Thomas. I'm glad because I have a distinct kinship with him. I'm glad because Thomas's story is good news for all of us who struggle with questions and aren't always sure of the answers we receive. Thomas reminds us that doubt isn't an obstacle to faith. Thomas shows us that Jesus doesn't condemn us for our questions. In fact, Jesus comes to us in the midst of them. Sometimes I think we too quickly dismiss doubts and questions, thinking that they're the product of an immature faith. Sometimes we might even think that those with real faith don't have questions. They no longer distrust, trust, or believe. I don't think that's true. Faith isn't the absence of questions. It's the willingness to pursue them. We might even want to nominate Thomas to be the patron saint for all who are trying to live a life of reflective faith, one that doesn't settle for easy answers or platitudes. It's a faith that's both willing to challenge and to stay open to possibilities. And that's what Easter's about. Easter's the possibility of possibilities. And we are Easter people living in uncertain and unsettling times. We watch the news and our hearts break as we hear the stories of people dying alone, of people struggling in their isolation, of people who are just facing the challenges of ordinary life, but in the midst of a pandemic, of people who are trying to cope with the aftermath of tornadoes and maintain a healthy physical distance. Even if we don't feel afraid, we sense the fear of others and the anxiety and sadness they're living with. But we also hear the stories that offer us hope and cause our hearts to soar. A mom who gives birth and immediately afterwards is identified as having the coronavirus. But the baby's negative and so's the dad. And so they go home with the mom in isolation and the dad stepping up to care for their newborn. And also all the family and friends that surround them at a distance, but dropping off food, sharing notes of support, a family that's living through the challenging time, hope made real. We see people having drive-by birthday parties, and even our own hello video, just to say we see one another. Still, it can be hard to feel confident and assured of a hopeful future. There's so much uncertainty. And yet, we can be like Thomas. Sometimes I think we forget how brave Thomas really was. Thomas is the disciple who, when Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, had told, or rather sent word to Jesus that Lazarus was ill and dying, and the disciples say to Jesus, let's not go there. It's way too fraught with danger. Thomas is the one who goes, let's go, so that we may die with you, if that is what the future holds. Thomas lived with both courage and doubt. I think Thomas shows us what the essence of faith is. And Jesus came to Thomas in his doubt, in that uncertainty. And I believe he comes to us also. We may not always be sure of the answer, but we can always be assured that Jesus comes. We never struggle alone. And we're invited, like Thomas, to look, to see, and to experience the presence of Jesus with us. So I invite you, as post-Easter people, to continue to wrestle with the questions and the uncertainty, but live faithfully as our faith is resurrected every day. And when we do so, we dance on. We believe we follow the Lord of the dance, as is sung to us or heard by us in that old hymn, the Lord of the dance who leads on. I believe Jesus is a great dance partner, allowing us to choose our own steps and to follow the music we hear in our hearts. Some of you are probably like me and we don't follow well. But Jesus keeps coming back to us, and still we dance. Sometimes we dance through sadness and sorrow. Many years ago, my dad died a long and painful death related to cancer. But at his funeral, we played Garth Brooks' song, The Dance. Because my dad loved to dance, and he was a horrible dancer, but he loved to dance. And he'd partner with anybody. That song, The Dance, has these lyrics. I'm glad I didn't know the way it all would go. I could have missed the pain, but then I'd have had to miss the dance. I'm confident that Jesus likes all kinds of music, country western, classical, and Hawaiian hula music. Why Hawaiian hula music? Because the hula is a story dance. When we see people doing the hula, or we've even tried it ourselves, we know that it tells a story. And our lives tell a story of our relationship with God and with one another. We don't always need to use words to tell the story of Jesus. And truthfully, our actions speak louder than words. The way we live, the way we love, the way we dance tells the story of our love for God and for one another. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet to come to believe." Blessed are we who with Thomas can say, "My Lord and my God." May we join with Jesus in the dance of life. I invite you to dance on, doing the hula, showing through our lives the story of God's love for us, as we say together the prayer that Jesus taught, saying, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen." Let's all do the hula as we hear Claire play. I thank you for supporting our church with your prayers and your financial gifts, which make it possible for us to be dance partners with God and our community as we feed the hungry of Taos. You can donate by mailing in your donation. Go into our website, elpoblitoumc.org, and donating online or dropping a check off at church. May we all do the hula and love God and love others. Amen.